Welcome, Construction Nation, to this month's special bonus episode, number 4. And today we're going to be talking about learning about the disc and building with style. And for today's episode, I have invited my colleague, Reaugh, to join us and present this masterclass. We wanted to share with you something that we use every single day here at OrgMetrics. And I think it's a game changer for leaders, teams, and really anyone who wants to communicate more effectively. It is an instrument that measures personality, and it's called DISC. Okay, I want to tell you a little bit about Reaugh, besides the fact that we sit next to each other in our office. Reaugh is also a certified master-level partnering facilitator, and he has a master's degree from Pepperdine University in dispute resolution. He facilitates around 150 partnering sessions per year to dozens of project teams. And he is really our go-to trainer for DISC and has worked with dozens of teams to implement DISC. So that's why I thought he would be great for joining us today. So thanks, Reaugh, for coming and joining us today.
Thanks so much, Sue.
So let's just kick off by starting to tell Construction Nation and all of us about DISC. Now, how did it come to be such a powerful tool?
Well, Sue, we were talking about this the other day, and really, at the end of the day, if there's one thing that I could share with the industry, it would be for project team members to better understand how they communicate with each other. The DISC is the most powerful instrument and tool that we have at our disposal to quickly and simply share with people how they like to work, what they like to do, and how they like to speak. And really what it teaches people is how to speak to each other and teach others to speak so they can hear each other. It's super powerful for project teams. We love this DISC tool because it focuses on people's behavior at work and at home, and it really helps you first identify your strengths and work preferences so you can make sure your role aligns with your personality. Because literally when people are doing their personality, when people's work follows their personality, they have more energy. And we all know when people have more energy, they can put more creativity into their work, more passion into their work, and they're not tired at the end of the day. They're charged up. It also helps you learn how your team members communicate. And lastly, you can learn how to actually flex your speaking and your communication style so your counterparts can better hear you. We've trained dozens of teams and thousands of people in this built-on style training, which is specific for construction project teams. And it's so helpful for teams that are struggling with ability to communicate. And what's cool about it is we base it on this DISC assessment, which is the most researched and most utilized personality instrument across the United States. And it's a no judgment way to better understand how you communicate and how your colleagues communicate. So if I've been struggling, if I'm having a personality issue, it just puts it out there for us to better understand each other without judgment. There isn't a right answer. There's not a wrong answer. It's just how we communicate. It's been a super powerful tool for breaking the ice, for getting teams together. I love to use it with executive teams or teams that are about to do a strategic partnership or start talking about strategic goals, or with a construction team that's struggling. It's a tool that I love to use because it instantly builds empathy and gives people a set of tools that they can apply that day to help improve how they communicate, not only with their work colleagues, but with their family as well. It's super powerful.
I would agree with you completely. My experience with DISC, when I first discovered it back in the 80s, I felt like I finally had a window that I could look through, that I could understand myself and others so that I knew how I needed to communicate so that it could be effective. I also understood better what motivated me. And so I know we've used it a lot with teams too, just the composition, which I'm sure you're going to talk about later. But right now, tell us a little bit about the DISC model itself. It's a powerful tool. So tell us a little bit about what makes up this model.
Happy to. Well, In the DISC model, it's comprised of 4 behavioral orientations. And this is all based in Jungian psychology. So this has been around since the 1890s. And let's start first with extroversion versus introversion. This is something that we talk about. It's become part of our regular parlance on construction teams and with people in corporate industry. And really what we're talking about is where people pull their energy from. It's often spoken about, but not well understood. We also talk about task orientation versus relationship orientation. But first, let's unpack the introversion versus extroversion. An introvert or introversion really means that an individual pulls their energy from solitude. They need to be alone in order to grow energy. An example from my family, my dad is an introvert, and we always knew the rule that when he would wake up in the morning, we had to give him a couple hours to charge up. He would do his 3 crosswords, he would finish his 3 cups of coffee, and after those crosswords and those coffees was a great time to talk to him in the morning. But unless and until he'd had that, it wasn't time to talk to Dad yet. So all of us have studies in our family about who are the folks that get power from being alone and who are the folks that want to charge into your room in the morning and greet you with a big hello. The counter side would be extroverts. These are folks that gather energy from working and existing in groups. And in our DISC model, there's a couple of styles that we'll get into in a little bit. And introverted styles are our S and our C. And then our extroverted styles are our D and our I. And we'll talk about what those letters stand for. And if you're picking up what I'm putting down, you can see that D and I are the 2 letters that start DISC. S and C are the second. So D, I, S, and C. We'll get into those in a little bit. An analogy for you, if you've ever been to a party, let's say it starts at standard college party time, which is about, between 10 and 11 in the evening, and you walk in and you open the door and music is playing. You open the door and you see a scene of people. There's a dance floor. People are dancing in the middle of the dance floor. And when I open that door and I see a crowded party, you're going to have one of 2 reactions typically. If you're an extrovert, you're going to be super excited. You're going to see all that energy. You're going to be seeing the dance floor, and you'll probably head straight to the center of that party. You're going to find your friends. You'll be right in the middle of the party. The more extroverted you are, the more attracted you're going to be to that large group. Our introverts are going to open that same exact door, look at the exact same scene, and the only thing that will escape their lips is a sigh or an "oh no." And what they're looking for is an escape route. Right? They're looking for a path to either get to the perimeter of the party or possibly get outside so they can have a conversation and talk to one person so they actually can hear them. Right? We have very different orientations to where we derive our energy from. By the end of the party, the extrovert is going to be charged up. They've been in the middle of it. They've been talking to people. They've been socializing. They've got a ton of energy. And it will be difficult for them to get back to sleep. For our introverts, conversely, they will be exhausted by the end of that. And it's a spectrum, right? Not everybody is an extreme extrovert. Some of us are a blend. But what it helps us understand is, where do we get our energy from? Is it from groups or is it from being alone? And so in our work, we can balance how much of it is around people and how much isolation we need. The other type of behavioral orientation relates to our task orientation, meaning the basis of my day, the quality of my day, it's based on how many things I accomplish. A task-oriented person has a checklist, and the further they get down their checklist, the better the day was. For our other styles, we have more relationship-oriented people that emphasize relationships over their task. So we talk more about quality of time rather than quantity of time, right? We may have different orientations towards time. And so our quality of time people are going to really emphasize how they connect. And their quality of their day is going to be based on whether they actually connected with people throughout the day. So the intersection of these behavioral orientations make up our 4 basic personalities or behavioral styles. So I'm going to talk about these in detail a little more. So the 4 styles that I talked about, there's D, I, S, and C. So D stands for dominance. And then I stands for influence. S stands for steadiness, and C stands for conscientiousness. And it's a combination of our introversion and extroversion, as well as our task and relationship orientation, that allow us to land on these styles. People have all four of them. And when you take the DISC assessment, what you do is you get a better understanding of which are the more dominant styles that you have in your day-to-day work. So typically for Orgmetrics, what we do is we have people fill out the assessment, and we're talking about who you are at work. And so you're going to fill out the assessment thinking about your current work role. And in an ideal world, your work role, you're going to have a natural style that who you are. If you could just wave your magic wand and have the perfect job, then you have your adapted style, which is who you are at work, what you're doing in your current role. And hopefully they're about the same. But let's talk about those four styles. So first is the dominant style. This is the high D. They represent about 12% of the population. The dominant style tend to be assertive and task-focused. They're often competitive and results-oriented. They're extroverted, and they're very task-oriented, right? So we have people who are extroverted. They're going to be social. They'll be able to talk to you, but they'll also be very results-oriented. So they'll be focused on the task at hand. Their strengths, they can be really strong in their opinions. They're highly strategic. They speak with people directly, and they're very comfortable with change. Now, Sue did a study many years ago that I think has been super valuable, looking at extroverted styles and dominant styles specifically, and how that relates to entrepreneurial personalities. Really, is there an entrepreneurial personality? And what we found is if you're D, you need to have a D at or above the midline in order to have an entrepreneurial personality. Somebody who is comfortable with change, comfortable with taking risk, and has enough ego strength or personality to drive a vision. And so typically with entrepreneurs, that's what we see, that we have some dominant style in there. Now, every strength is also our weakness, right? So with our dominant style, we have our strengths. We also have some weaknesses. So particularly when we're under stress, some of our weaknesses of the dominant style is that they can move too quickly. They're very comfortable with change. They're very comfortable with strategy. And sometimes they move so quickly, they're leading, but they may not have followers coming with them. So if they're going too fast, they may lose groups of people. They can be overly assertive. Have you ever had a sales call where you could feel people jumping through the phone at you? You can feel that energy when it's coming at you. The other piece is their dominant style may lack listening skills. And under stress, they can want to control the outcome and control people. The next style is our I, high I influencer style. That's about 32% of the population. They tend to be very people-oriented and assertive. You get some of the competition that's related to the dominant style, but it comes from a different source. So the strengths of the influencer style is that they're friendly and optimistic and energetic. They tend to be strong communicators. They love to work with other people. They love to work with groups to achieve goals. As I said, some of our strengths can also be our weaknesses. So on the weaker side, they can be a little chatty. They can emphasize play rather than work, and they can be self-centered. Under stress, they can be flaky and lose the details. So the joke is that when a high I is under stress, if they have to have a difficult conversation, first they'll avoid the conversation, then they'll come up with other things that they want to do to distract themselves from the conversation. Hopefully it would have resolved it themselves or been resolved by other people, and then eventually they'll get to it, right? So the high I can be very powerful and very helpful for a team, and it's also important to understand when they can struggle under stress as well. The next style is S, or steadiness, and based on the research, it's about 30% of the population. These folks are reserved and people-oriented. They tend to be, their strengths are that they're excellent implementers, they're people-focused, they're reliable and consistent. Their weaknesses is that they can be protective of process and slow to change. They can also be a bit compliant, like they'll go along to get along. So the strength is that we need people to come up with ideas and then people to execute those ideas. And that's what your high S population is really strong at. They're really good at developing and implementing systems so lots of people can do it in a repetitive way. The last style, C, is compliance. This is about 26% of the population. And if you're a high C already, you've probably checked whether the disc is actually the most researched in the United States and are wondering how good of an assessment this actually is. You're probably checking my credentials as well. Our high C are analytical and task-oriented. Their strengths is that they're accurate and detail-oriented. They're also highly intuitive. And the little-known secret about our high C personality is that they tend to have high personal standards. They can be perfectionistic, and their standards are strict on themselves as much as they are, or even higher than for other people. On the weak side, they can be a bit perfectionistic. They can be slower to make decisions because they want to look at all of the data and really understand the detail before they make a quality decision. And they can, as a result of looking at the detail, they can lack some big picture view. The other piece is they can come off as judgmental. Their intention is to be high quality, but that can come off as judgmental.
Quick question here, Rob. So 12%, 32%, 30%, and 26% adds up to more than 100%. Well, how's that?
I believe that we have a combination of styles. And so people typically have a combo, and the net result is that you can have a combination of styles, which means you may be high in an I or a D. So me, for example, I'm a DI, which means I would have a combination. I is my highest, and then D is my second highest. And it's common for some people to actually have two that are really high. You'll see an S and C combination that happens a lot of the time as well.
That makes perfect sense.
So why is this so important? Why do we want to emphasize the 4 styles? Part of what's important is to recognize simple categories that allow us to break our team into groups. One, so we can understand how they tend to prefer to communicate. But the other piece is that it's really helpful because when you're looking at this DISC assessment, part of the power of it is you can look at it as an individual, but also with a group of people. And what research from Google and others have resulted in is that we really know that we want a diverse team. We want a team of each of the styles. And oftentimes when I come in and have to do, or I'm doing a training as an intervention, right? We want to create and diagnose a little bit what's going on if a construction team is struggling. Part of the power of this tool is that it allows us to understand if the team actually has people from all 4 strengths comprised in the team. If we look at the team and it looks like a wheel, we have people in all 4 quadrants, then we're going to have a really strong, well-rounded, balanced team, right? Our Ds are helping with strategy and decision-making and pushing the pace. Our Is help our team communicate effectively and also make sure we're balancing the work tasks and the fun tasks. Our S's make sure that stuff actually gets done. We need process and implementation. And our C's, they help us with quality. And the other piece about our high C's, our highly analytical folks, is they tend to have really good intuition. So me personally, as a high I, my tendency is that I love everybody. I always love everybody. And I really need to lean on folks with a high C who have some intuition to actually get a gut feel for when we meet new people, when we meet new team members. They can really help using that intuition to make sure that I'm not just loving everybody that comes through the door, that we can actually make sure we get quality candidates that walk through the door. So really what we want to make sure is that our team has a good diversity of styles. The nice thing about construction is that our teams tend to change through phases of construction. So you look at your team today and you can figure out who do we need in order to help balance our wheel. Because if we have 2 styles only, which can be really common in certain projects, then we need to figure out how to bring up either people's secondary style, or we need to attract some more people to that team to help us be more well-rounded. So really understanding what our team's composition is and who we would need to bring in and what styles we can bring up help us round out our wheel.
So that sounds great because now we have a better understanding of kind of the intersection of these styles that create the 4 styles: introversion, extroversion, task orientation, relationship orientation, create the DISC. And we also know that in order to be an effective team, you need to have all 4 styles. So can you tell us a little bit about how does it affect the team working together?
I think the best way is to really understand how this works is to look at some cases. So I brought a couple examples that I wanted to share with you. The first place where we find the DISC is super helpful is even within our own business. As I said, we believe deeply in practicing what we preach. We love to use this stuff. And so literally every person that comes through the door to work with OrgMetrics takes a DISC assessment. And what it does is it allows us to figure out whether they're going to even enjoy the work that ultimately we expect that they are going to do. Hiring the right people for the right job is critical. And when we're in a small business, it's especially critical because if you have 10 people, employee number 11 has a much bigger impact on the outcomes of your business than employee number 536. Right? So, and the other piece is even when you have a large organization, when you have 500 or 1,000 or 2,000 people, we have all seen the effect that a bad hire can have on our organization, particularly in a strategic role, right? If we have a leadership role, someone in a leadership role, and they're a bad fit for that seat, it can have very profound effects on that team or that organization or that group. So, what we want to do is align the tasks of the job with someone's personality style. The whole theory being is that people tend to have more energy when they get to have their personality in the job. To give you an example, and as I said, I'm a high I, high influencer style, and I have a D chaser, right? So what does that mean? I'm a very extroverted style. I care about people. I love working with groups of people and groups of teams. My D is a chaser, and that means I like to have strategic work, and I'm accustomed to change. So for me, a nightmare job would be sitting at my desk doing the exact same thing over and over and over again. What is super helpful is that being a partnering facilitator is kind of the dream because there's a lot of change. I get to work with people. I get to work with different teams throughout the month, and it's dynamic. So for me, my natural and my adapted styles for work, when I do a DISC assessment, they're very similar. Basically, I'm an extroverted style who likes to give presentations. And guess what? As a facilitator, that's part of our practice. And then we also get to use our dispute resolution chops when teams are struggling. And we get to use our communication chops when they need help. So the other piece is that for me, my C is something that I've had to flex up. Now, this is something professionally that I've had to learn kind of the hard way. As I mentioned before, my dad is a highly analytical person. He's a scientist. And so every single paper that we wrote went through his QA/QC process. So from a very young age, every single piece of writing that we did that we had to produce for school went through intense scrutiny, and he would bleed all over it. There was lots of red ink all over it, and we had to follow all those details. And if he gave me an edit and I missed that edit and had him look at it for a second revision, I would get lit up. It was a problem, right? So I really had to learn the details. And really what he taught me was that detail orientation was going to be my path to success. That was underlined when I was an athlete. And the difference between somebody in the 98th percentile in any athletic activity and the 99th percentile is very close. It's in the details. And so that's how I've learned. I've had to flex my style in order to do it. The net result is when I'm doing the highly concentrated, highly analytical work, I can do it. For example, I've been a secretary-treasurer in an organization and jobs where I've had to do detail-oriented work. But at the end of every day, my fingernails are a lot shorter and I'm totally exhausted. I'm very tired. So what happens? How do I use the DISC? Well, when I'm looking for someone to blend with, if I'm, for example, looking for an assistant, or if I'm looking for somebody who would be of helpful support to me, for me, a perfect team member is going to have a high S and a high C. They're going to have a different style than I will have, and it will help us have all four between the two of us. Really what that means is that our high S is going to help us with structure and organization. I'm terrible at developing structure and organization. I love implementing other people's organizational stuff. And the other piece is with the detail work, because it makes me exhausted, I can do it, and it's important to do it, but I can have somebody who can catch and watch the details. The other piece is that as a high I, one of our weaknesses is that we hate getting embarrassed. And so having somebody with a high S and a C means they have some people orientation and some detail orientation, so they have enough social aptitude that my feelings won't get hurt all the time. The analogy that I get, and oftentimes when we're doing our DISC training, I have people raise their hands and I ask if there's any high I's in the room, how many of them are married to a highly detail-oriented person? And what I've found is it's about 80% of the high I's in the room are married to a highly detail-oriented person. My wife is a high C, and the example that I always share was that for years we'd been together, and she got tired of me hunting for my keys every morning because, as I said, high I's can tend to be a little flaky and we lose stuff, and sometimes they were in my jacket pocket, and sometimes they were in my jeans, and sometimes who knows where they were. And I would spend hours searching, and I would get really frustrated. And eventually, one day, a bowl arrived right in front of our door, and it just became the key bowl. And I said, "What is this for?" And she said, "That's where you put your keys and wallet so you don't have to look for it anymore." So the solution just sort of arrived. I didn't ask for it, but it happened. And that's one of the tiny ways that she's made my life a whole lot better. So all you high I's out there, find a C, and they'll be your spouse. They'll be awesome.
So one of the struggles I know that teams have, and construction teams, as you're trying to put together a team for a project, is we just hope that the right people will come together and they'll be the right fit. And we've all seen teams where they just never gelled together. So how can we use DISC to help us to make sure we kind of get the right fit in our teams?
It's an awesome question. One of the ways that we use it is this fit for team. So I talked about it a little earlier, that we want a good balance of D's and I's and S's and C's within a team. We want it to look like a wheel. That allows us to be a really high-functioning group. And what we often see in construction is that, particularly on our builders side, that can be a more entrepreneurial set of folks. We tend to see a lot of high D's on our builders side. And on their counterpart, on the engineering side, on our owner's side, we can see lots of C's. Some analytical people, they need to be able to do the math and understand the details in order to even get their engineering degree, right? And what we see over and over again is that we can have conflicts between these two styles, right? The D likes to make decisions, they like to move fast, they don't want the details, they want to go, 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 go. Our C's need the analysis, they need the details in order to ensure there's a quality decision, and they tend to be the slowest in decision making. So right there, we have a pacing issue. So imagine, for example, if you're trying to play a musical piece and the drummer wants to do 120 beats per minute, that's our high D, and our bassist wants to do 80 beats per minute, high C, right? We have a pacing problem, and it ends up sounding like a junior high orchestra rather than the San Francisco Symphony, right? So pacing is really important. And one example of a project team where this has been a very useful tool was when I had exactly this dynamic. I had a builder that was a high D, and I had an engineer that was a high C. And they were having challenges each month with their pay applications. Basically, what was happening was we had our high D builder saying, look, it's a pay estimate. It needs to be pretty close. It needs to be pretty good. And then our engineer said, it needs to be near perfect because I'm not the ultimate signatory on this. This has to go through another group that has to look at it, approve it. And if there's any issues with any of the elements of this pay app, it won't get paid. It will set us back 3 weeks. So it sets us back more time, and we'll have even more delay if it's not good enough quality in order for them to even look at it. And so the intent of the engineer was to slow down and make sure it was accurate to ensure they didn't get any revise and resubmits, which would cause further delay. The problem was they didn't actually agree on the process beforehand. And this is what happens all the time. You're assuming that they're just preventing you from getting paid, when really their intention was to make sure that you could get paid. And so using the DISC analogy, I basically walked them through the personality styles. And what was really helpful is there's no judgments. It's just, this is your preferred style. This is your preferred style. We have a pacing issue here. How can we come up with a process that makes sense for both of you? So I could tap in to our D's strategy and our C's acumen in order to get benefits from both. And once they agreed on the process, our whole theory of partnering and working together with teams is people don't argue with the stuff they help to create, right? So when they co-created it, now they have a process that they've agreed to. And so what they realized was it is a pay app. There are estimates. We have subcontractors who've been slow in turning in our assessments each month. And so if we need to have people not be included in this month and they can catch it next month because we can't get it on time, so be it. So they agreed to a process. It had a huge impact, and they ended up using this structure to resolve other issues. Basically, we taught them how to resolve stuff between each other, and they extrapolated it for the rest of the project and had a smooth closeout after months of challenges. It's a really powerful tool because, again, there's no judgment. We have preferred styles, and if we can take advantage of those styles, it really helps the team get a good outcome.
So that sounds really magnificent, actually, and understanding the dynamic seems almost like a miracle, I'm sure, to the team members who are just stuck in it. And I think a lot of teams do feel like they're stuck. So can we apply this also to the team's communication and overall project delivery? How might we do that?
And a great question. Again, part of how we do this, how we improve our communication is first we have to understand our own preferences, right? Imagine that we speak different languages. I think that's what's really helpful about this tool is that we have our 4 styles. You have a dominant style and a secondary style. So I can have a D and I can have an I, right? I have a dominant style and then a secondary style. And what's really helpful is understanding how my style prefers to communicate. So I know how I like to be communicated with. And if I understand my counterpart's style, they have a different way that they like to communicate. Effectively, if I like speaking English and they like speaking Spanish, I either need to learn some Spanish, they need to learn some English, or we need to figure out a jointly created language. And after traveling overseas and living overseas for a few years, what I learned is, one, everybody can kind of cobble together broken English, but when in doubt, draw a picture. Because if I need to find directions in a country where I have no idea how to get anywhere, I need to draw a picture of it, and then somebody can point me in the right direction, right? We need to do the same thing within our construction teams. You have certain people you gel with instantly. You have other people that it's a struggle. And so my question is, when you're struggling with somebody, are you actually sitting together and figuring out their language? I'm challenging you. Have you sat down with them and drawn a picture? Because if you haven't, you need to try it. And so this is part of what training people on this disc and building with style is really all about. We negotiate every day on our construction projects. We talk with people. We have teams of teams. We have hundreds, if not thousands of people, and we need simplistic ways for them to understand what they need to communicate, right? So the big piece that I like to emphasize is when our teams learn their styles and understand what their own preferences are and what their counterparts' preferences may be, they have a huge strategic advantage. Think about how much faster you can go if you understand how people like to communicate. I'm going to borrow from Sun Tzu in The Art of War, and this is out of sequence, so forgive me that, but it was said, if you know neither the enemy nor yourself, you will succumb in every battle. Basically, if I don't know myself and I don't know my opponent, I'm going to lose every time. If you know yourself but not the enemy, for every victory gained, you will also suffer a defeat. So if I have a good understanding of what my army is like, what my strengths are, and my weaknesses are, I'm going to win a little more than half the time. For every victory, I will have a defeat. If I know the enemy and know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. So I was a volleyball player. And something that we talk about in volleyball all the time is we need to control what we can do on our side of the net. Meaning, when they serve, how we receive that serve, our offense that we run, all of the things that we do on our side of the net is under our control. That's internal organizational philosophy, right? If I do my part, I can win about every other game, right? If I understand what they're going to do, in other words, if I have a strategy for my opponent, I'm going to win every match. If I have a strategy for me and if I have a strategy for them. So the idea is that if I have a deep understanding of how I like to communicate, and I have a deep understanding, or at least a cursory understanding, of how my counterpart likes to communicate, I can flex my style and have more success with them. And so I just wanted to give you a couple highlights. We do a deep dive on this in the training, but I wanted to give you a couple tools you can walk away with. So we have a high dominant style. You're looking for somebody who likes to make decisions quickly. You've talked on the phone with them. You can feel their energy coming through the phone. They're really strategic. With a high D, they're going to come straight at you, and you need to be prepared for a decision. Think fire. Ready? Aim. So they've already fired, right? When I'm talking with them, one of the big keys is that I want 3 bullet points or less. I need to get to it. It needs to be factual and to the point. We need to focus on the what. This is when I'm talking with my high Ds. For my high Is, they tend to be a bit conflict avoidant, so if I'm negotiating with them and working with them, you'll probably have to approach the issue in a conversational way. You need to identify why it needs to be resolved and by when. A deadline's really helpful. The other thing you want to do is take them to lunch. You want to take them to a friendly place and invest time in the meeting. And then if you can frame it in terms of a story or a personal anecdote where they can wrap their own head around it, you're going to get a better outcome. Focus on the who. For your high S, they can be a little conflict avoidant as well. So when we're working with them, you want to provide some evidence of the benefits for resolution. Our high S's are going to want to have details and examples. They're going to want to focus on how to implement it and who's done it before. And the last piece is we need to be patient when we're implementing change. And the high C's are going to be very comfortable discussing issues, but we need to make sure that we're on it. We need to understand our information and present facts. We need to bring a pros and cons list and focus on the why. And the other piece is we want to have a step-by-step explanation, and we need to provide time and allow time for review because decisions may be slower. You're going to get the right decision, but it may not happen in the same time frame you were hoping for. So be prepared for that. By flexing your style, you can really get a better outcome. As I said, you have to know yourself, you have to know your counterpart. That's the way to win every negotiation at the end of the day.
That's actually extremely interesting and would be awesome if everyone could have that ability to just sort of even read people and understand themselves, so you could understand where you're compatible and where you're incompatible and the mix of it all. But really that one-on-one is where so much communication goes off the rails. And especially when we're thinking now we're communicating when we're texting or we're sending an email, when so much of the communication is lost in the tone of the voice, the pace isn't there, see facial or body language, you just lose a lot of the communication. So really wrapping all of this into a way that Construction Nation can use it, what would be your advice? What are the take-home lessons for all of us, Rob?
Yeah, I think that's so important so we can implement this right away, right? So the first is invest some time in using the DISC personality assessment. Use it for your new hires. It can help. It helps so much because you want to identify what people's energy is about. Are they actually going to be interested in the work that they're doing every day? It also helps if you have the DISC assessment for your leadership staff or your whole team, so you can take a look at your composition and see if there's a hope for success for you guys. Oftentimes it can be a helpful diagnostic tool. It helps provide some information so you can really take a look at your team and determine, are we set up for success? Or do we have an opportunity in the next quarter to make a few adjustments that would really help round out our team? The other piece of why it's really helpful to, one, use this personality assessment and then get trained up on it is it really improves project delivery and people's empathy. So Google recently launched research on their most high-performing teams. And over again, what we're seeing is that psychological safety and diversity of thought are more important than simply gathering the most intelligent and the highest performers together in a team. You can't just slap together your high performers into a team and expect good results. We need to have a good composition, and we need to have some psychological safety. And a DISC training really does both, because you develop empathy by understanding how you communicate and others in a no-judgment forum. And you have some tools to actually speak together more effectively. So right away, they have a better set of tools to talk through challenging issues, which is something that we do on construction projects every day. And the last thing is, I hope that people can start understanding that conflict on construction projects often relate to interpretation of role, or can purely be a personality conflict over work style. So first, how people interpret their role is something that, Sue, we could talk for hours about, right?
We see that every day.
And another is that we have personality conflicts, but really is it a conflict over work style and preference of how you want your information? So there's science to how people jibe, right? There are personality styles that are just going to gel more quickly in work and away from work. And so having some tools, having an assessment that allows you to figure out what your team's made of can really give you a lot of information. It's a diagnostic, so it's only as strong as if you implement and do anything with it, but at least we want you to have a passing understanding of how it works.
That sounds like it would be such an important thing for many projects I see out there that have struggles. And a lot of times I see they're struggling and they talk about the issues, but really behind the issues is that they don't like each other. So they kind of make up the issues because I don't really like you, so I'm not going to make your life easy. So they're going to talk about that. So I know there's a lot of different assessments out there on the market that DISC. And so can you help people kind of navigate that a bit? How will they find a DISC assessment? And which one do you like better? And how would they go about doing this?
Well, hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn, Reaugh. I have an unfortunate spelling to my last name, Reaugh, but I'm the only one, so that's pretty easy to find. So hit me up there. I want to extend that my favorite DISC assessment that we use a couple, but the team building from TTI Admin is absolutely great. And so I want to recommend that people use that one. Reach out to me and I'd be happy to connect you so we can get you a DISC assessment if you're curious, you want to learn a little bit more about it. You can also reach out to us if you want to set up a training or learn a little bit more about this unit that we've created for many construction teams. So hit me up on LinkedIn. You can always email Sue and get to me as well.
That sounds great. And so I just want to thank you so much, Rob, for coming and doing this masterclass. I know I see the teams after you've done the training, and many of them are going, "Oh my God, that was so great." I mean, even like months later, they're going, "Man, the DISC is so important to us." It was just an eye-opener. It was a game changer for us. It helped us to become one succinct, integrated team. And so I thank you for that, and I thank you for sharing so that more people can know about this and maybe use it on their projects. And really, if anybody has any questions, feel free to email me at sue@constructiondreamteam.com. I'll make sure Rob gets that message. And we know that the results we see are pretty remarkable. And it really is the most important thing that we've ever learned in my life, that I would say that. And so, but remember, we'll listen next month and we will do another bonus episode for you. And also that Construction Dream Team drops every Monday morning at 4 a.m. Pacific time. So please listen next week when I will interview another industry leader or expert so that you can learn from OPE, other people's experiences, and create your construction dream team. Thank you so much, Rob, for being here. You're the best.
Thank you.
Thanks to all the listeners.
Thank you, everybody.
We will catch you next time. Take care.